The first thing I notice is the silence. It's a thick woolen quiet, broken only by the soft, rhythmic click of a knitting needle against another. I am wrapped in it, this silence, tucked into the corner of our worn velvet sofa, with a blanket that smells of sandalwood and rain. My gaze is trapped, not by the flickering fireplace, but by her hands. Ilara's hands are a story of their own. Long, pale fingers, dotted with a constellation of tiny freckles across the knuckles, moving with a precise, gentle economy. The yarn, the color of a stormy sea, flows through them like water. Click, click, click. Each movement is a meditation. Each loop she forms is a quiet rebellion, because she is blind. This is the twist, the visual curiosity that still, after all this time, catches in my throat like a sob. She can't see the deep blue of the yarn, or the way the firelight gilds her silver blonde hair. She can't see the tremor in my hands as I watch her. She navigates her world through memory and touch, and she is knitting me a sweater. For her, it is an act of faith. For me, it is a monument to a love so profound it reshaped the very architecture of my soul. She is building a fortress of wool around a heart she once saved from shattering, a heart she has never seen, but knows better than anyone ever has. And every time I watch her work, I am flung back to the beginning, to the storm and the stranger who pulled me from the wreckage. Underscore 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 underscore. It started with a different kind of storm, one made of grief and rage. I had driven away from my old life, the city a receding bruise on the horizon, my vision blurred by tears I refused to shed. The rain began as a mist, then a deluge, lashing the windshield of my small car as I took a coastal road I didn't know. I was lost in every sense of the word, my heart a frantic, wounded bird beating against the cage of my ribs. The car hydroplaned with a terrifying indifference. A sickening lurch, the world spinning in a kaleidoscope of gray sky and black asphalt. The crunch of metal against the gnarled, ancient oak at the edge of the woods was the loudest sound I had ever heard, and then the most profound silence. I remember the smell of damp earth and gasoline, the sting of cold rain on my face. I remember trying to move, a sharp, electric pain shooting up my leg, pinning me to the seat. Panic, cold and slick, began to coat my insides. I was alone. I was going to die here, entombed in this twisted metal, my final act of pathetic, angry flight. Then a voice. Can you follow my voice? It was calm, clear, cutting through the hiss of the rain and the thrumming in my ears. I turned my head, a painful, grinding effort, and saw her. A figure standing in the downpour, a dark raincoat slick with water, her face pale and stark in the gloom. She wasn't looking at the wreck, not directly. Her head was tilted, listening. "Hello," I croaked, my voice a stranger's. "Good," she said, a single word of approval that felt like a lifeline. "My name is Ilara. I live just through these trees. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" She moved closer, her step sure and steady on the sodden ground. As she neared, I saw the most startling thing, her eyes. They were the color of a summer sky, a clear, piercing blue, but they were unfocused, looking just past my shoulder. She knelt beside the shattered window, her hand reaching out, not flailing or grasping, but moving with a deliberate, searching grace until her cool fingers brushed my arm. My leg, I managed to whisper, "I think it's trapped." Her touch was firm, assessing, moving from my wrist to my shoulder, a brief, grounding pressure. "I'm going to get you out." She didn't say I'll try. She stated it as a fact, a truth as immutable as the rain. And I, a woman who trusted no one, believed her. What followed was a blur of pain and surreal determination. She used a tire iron from my own trunk, levering the crumpled door with a strength that seemed impossible for her slender frame. She spoke to me the entire time, her voice a low, steady anchor. "You're doing well. Almost there. Just breathe with me now." And I did. I matched my ragged breaths to the calm, even sound of hers. When the door gave way, she didn't hesitate. She slid her arms under my shoulders, ignoring the mud and the cold, and pulled me free. My legs screamed in protest, a white-hot agony, but the feeling of the open air, of being extracted from that tomb, was a relief so sharp it made me weep. I slumped against her, and she took my weight without a stumble. "Lean on me," she instructed, and I did. We moved through the woods, a three-legged creature stumbling towards sanctuary. I focused on the solid feel of her beside me, the scent of sandalwood that clung to her skin even through the petrichor, the absolute certainty in her steps even though she couldn't see the path. Her cottage was a small, stone thing, hidden by the trees. Inside, it was all warmth and tactile richness. Rough-hewn wooden beams, soft woolen blankets thrown over chairs, the scent of dried herbs and beeswax. She guided me to a chair by the fireplace, her hands never leaving me, a constant, guiding presence. "The phone lines are down from the storm," she said, kneeling before me. Her hands, those impossibly capable hands, gently probed my injured leg. "I have some medical training. May I?" I could only nod, then, remembering, whispered a hoarse yes. Her touch was clinical, yet infinitely gentle. She cut away the fabric of my trousers with a pair of sewing scissors, her fingers tracing the swelling around my ankle with a feather-light precision. I watched her face, the concentration there, the way she seemed to be reading the injury like Braille. She knew. She set the simple fracture with a quick, sure movement that made me cry out, my hand flying to grasp her shoulder. Her free hand came up and covered mine, a brief, solid comfort. "It's done," she said softly. "You'll be all right." As she wrapped my ankle in a firm bandage, I finally found my voice. You can't see." A small, almost smile touched her lips. It transformed her face, etching a delicate beauty where before there had only been stark composure. "No, but I can feel a break in the bone. I can hear the catch in your breath. I can smell the rain on you and the fear. It's enough." She made me tea, her movements around the small kitchen a practiced dance. She knew exactly how many steps to the cupboard, the precise location of the kettle, the shape of each mug. There was no fumbling, only a graceful, unerring accuracy. I was mesmerized. My own world, once so focused on spreadsheets and city views and the superficial gloss of everything, felt brittle and false in the face of her quiet confidence. She gave me dry clothes, soft, worn flannel pants, and a sweater that smelled overwhelmingly of her. She led me to a small guest room, her hand a gentle guide on my back. When she helped me into the bed, her fingers brushed a stray strand of hair from my forehead. The touch was so unexpected, so intimate, that my breath hitched. "Sleep," she commanded, her voice soft. "The storm is passing." And as I lay in the dark, listening to the rain soften to a whisper on the roof, I realized the storm inside me had quieted, too. The frantic, wounded bird in my chest had stilled, soothed by the steady, unseen presence of the woman in the room next door. I didn't know her, but in the space of a single, catastrophic hour, she had become the most solid, the most real person I had ever known. Underscore 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 the world shrank to the dimensions of her cottage. For days, I was a captive of my own healing body and the isolation wrought by the storm. The roads were washed out, the landline silent. My phone was a shattered piece of plastic in my wrecked car. We were utterly alone, Alara and I, in our stone and wood bubble. At first, the silence between us was vast and awkward. I was a city creature, used to the constant noise of traffic and human chatter. Silence was something to be filled, but Alara lived inside it. She listened to the world in a way I never had to the creak of the floorboards, the sigh of the wind in the chimney, the different songs of the birds outside her window. I watched her. It became my new occupation. I watched her knead bread, her hands dusted with flour, feeling the dough's readiness with a push of her thumb. I watched her tend her garden, her fingers brushing against leaves and petals, identifying weeds from herbs by scent and texture. She moved through her life not as someone navigating a darkness, but as someone in a deep, intimate conversation with the world. And slowly, I began to learn her language. I started by describing things to her. It began out of a clumsy, polite need to fill the quiet. The sky is a really soft gray today, I'd say, staring out the window, like a dove's wing. She'd pause in her task, a slight tilt to her head. That means the rain will hold off until evening. The air smells thin. Another time, I described the way the firelight caught the red tones and the wooden beams overhead. She came and sat beside me, her hand reaching out to find the beam, her fingertips tracing the grain. "I know," she said softly. "It feels warm here where the light hits it, cooler in the shadows." A shift was occurring in me. My gaze, once so critical and sharp, began to soften, to learn to see beyond the visual. I started to notice the symphony of textures in her home, the rough weave of the rug beneath my bare feet, the cool smoothness of the ceramic mug in my hands, the incredible softness of the wool blanket she had draped over my shoulders one chilly morning. Our interactions became a ballet of careful touches and shared sounds. I would hum a tune, and she would identify it, a faint smile on her lips. She would play old jazz records on a turntable, her body swaying slightly to the rhythm, and I would find myself watching the graceful line of her neck, the way her sweater draped over her slender shoulders. The first time I truly made her laugh, it felt like a victory. I was attempting to help her chop vegetables, a clumsy, dangerous endeavor I soon realized, and I'd fumbled a potato. It rolled across the floor with a comical thud. I let out a frustrated sigh. "It's escaped," I announced dramatically. Her laughter was a low, melodic sound, like water over stones. It filled the kitchen, warming it more than the stove ever could. It always does. There's a particular divot in the floorboards by the pantry. That's where they go to hide. I retrieved the potato, my own laughter joining hers. In that moment, the last of my guard crumbled. I was no longer the pitiful victim and she the stoic savior. We were just two women in a kitchen, laughing over a runaway potato. The first kiss happened because of a book. I was reading aloud to her, a novel I found on her shelf. It was a story of adventure and loss, and my voice grew thick with emotion during a particularly poignant passage. When I finished, the room was silent but for the crackle of the fire. I felt her hand on mine, stilling its nervous fidgeting with the page. "You feel stories deeply," she observed, her voice quiet. "It's in your voice." A tremor. "It was a sad part," I whispered, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. She was so close. I could feel the warmth radiating from her. "I know," she said. And then her other hand came up, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, my cheekbone, my eyebrow. It was a map maker's touch, learning the topography of my emotion. Her fingertips were whisper soft, yet they left a trail of fire on my skin. My eyes fluttered closed. When her lips met mine, it was not a question, but an answer. A soft, sure pressure that tasted of tea and of a quiet, immense courage. It was a kiss built not on sight, but on sensation, on the shared silence, the warmth of the fire, the scent of sandalwood that was now the scent of home. It was slow and deep, and it unspooled something tightly wound inside me. A knot of grief and fear I had carried for years simply loosened and melted away under the tender insistence of her mouth. I kissed her back, my hands coming up to cradle her face, my thumbs stroking the soft skin of her cheeks. In that kiss, I was not seen, but I was known. Known in a way that felt more profound, more terrifying, and more beautiful than anything I had ever experienced. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I lay beside her in her bed, our bodies curved together like parentheses. Her back was pressed against my chest, my arm wrapped around her waist, my hand splayed over her stomach. I listened to her breathing even out into sleep, felt the steady, solid beat of her heart against my palm. The world outside was dark and silent, but here, in this bed, I was surrounded by the most vibrant aliveness I had ever known. I had come here broken, but in her arms, I felt myself beginning, for the first time, to truly heal. Underscore 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 underscore. The world eventually intruded. A local farmer, checking on Alara after the storm, found my car and then us. There were phone calls to make, a trip to a proper doctor, conversations with insurance companies. A life, my old life, was demanding I return. But I couldn't, or I wouldn't. I extended my stay, inventing reasons, clinging to the sanctuary of the cottage and the woman who had become its soul. My life in the city, with its high-pressure job and a recent, messy breakup with a woman who loved the idea of me more than the reality, felt like a poorly written play I had no interest in starring in anymore. Alara never asked me to stay. She never asked me for anything, but her quiet presence was a question in itself. Our days settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were for coffee and the soft sounds of the radio. Afternoons were for walks, her hand tucked securely in the crook of my arm as I learned to be her eyes, describing the world in vivid, sensory detail. I told her about the way the sunlight dappled through the oak leaves, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the forest path. I described the iridescent wing of a dragonfly hovering over a pond, the grumpy expression of a badger we startled at the edge of the woods. In return, she taught me to listen for the woodpecker's distinctive tap-tap-tap, to identify the scent of wild mint crushing under our feet, to feel the subtle change in the breeze that foretold a shift in weather. Our intimacy deepened, a slow, tender unfurling. The second kiss happened in the garden, her lips tasting of sun-warmed strawberries she'd just picked. The third was in the rainwater shower, steam swirling around us, her hands sliding over my slick skin, learning the curves of my body with a reverence that made me tremble. The first time we made love, it was in the hush of a deep night. There was no frantic fumbling, no performative passion. It was a conversation conducted entirely with touch. Her hands were my guide, and mine were her eyes. She traced the line of my spine, vertebra by vertebra, and I gasped when her fingers found a sensitive spot at the base. Right there. She committed it to memory. I explored the delicate architecture of her collarbones, the soft swell of her breasts, the surprising strength in her thighs. We learned each other's landscapes in the dark, every sigh, every shudder, a word in a language only we understood. When I came apart under her touch, it was with a quiet, sobbing release that felt less like a climax and more like a homecoming. She held me as I trembled, her lips against my temple, whispering wordless comforts that sank into my bones. She unraveled all my walls, not with force, but with a patience that felt like the deepest form of devotion. In the afterglow, our limbs entwined, our hearts beating in a slow, synchronized rhythm, she whispered the fears she'd never given voice to. "People see the blindness first," she murmured, her head on my chest. "They see a limitation. They don't understand it's just a different way of being. They get impatient. Or worse, they treat me like I'm made of glass." I held her tighter, my fingers stroking her hair. "You are the strongest person I know," I whispered into the darkness, and I meant it with every fractured piece of my being. She was my calm, my center, and I, in my chaotic, city slicker way, was becoming hers. I handled the correspondence that required sight, read her mail aloud, helped her order supplies online. We were a perfect, symbiotic fit. I began to imagine a life here, a quiet life, a real life. I could write, maybe. I could be her hands in the world that required sight, and she could be my eyes in the world that truly mattered. But love, I was about to learn, is not just a shelter. It is also a target. And my past, the one I thought I had driven away from in a rage, was not finished with me. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one. The man came on a Tuesday. The sun was high, and I was outside, attempting to help Alara repot some herbs. The sound of a car engine, a sleek, aggressive purse so different from the farmer's truck, cut through the birdsong. A cold dread, familiar and slick, coiled in my stomach even before the car door slammed. I knew that walk. The arrogant, purposeful stride. Sarah, my ex. The woman who had shared my apartment, my bed, and my life until she decided my emotional unavailability was too great a challenge and had found solace in the arms of a colleague. Our breakup had been a nuclear winter of hissed accusations and shattered dishes. I had left with what I could carry and a heart turned to ash. She looked out of place in this natural setting, her designer heels sinking into the soft earth, her sharp, tailored coat a stark contrast to the flowing, soft fabrics Alara and I wore. Her eyes, hard and assessing, scanned the cottage before landing on me. "There you are," she said, her voice dripping with a faux warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "You're a hard woman to find, Maya. Hiding out in the sticks." I stood up, wiping my earthy hands on my pants, feeling a hot flush of shame and anger. "I'm not hiding. I'm living. What are you doing here, Sarah?" Alara had gone very still beside me. She couldn't see Sarah, but she could sense the shift in the air, the tension radiating from me in waves. Her hand found mine, a silent, solid anchor. Sarah's gaze flickered to our joined hands, and a smirk touched her lips. "I see. So this is the situation." Her eyes swept over Alara, taking in her bare feet, the simple dress, the unfocused gaze. The smirk deepened, condescending and cruel. "Cute. Look, Maya, we need to talk. It's about the apartment, and the joint account you so cleverly drained." It was a lie. I'd taken only my half. But that was Sarah's way rewrite history to make herself the victim. She took a step closer, her voice dropping into a familiar, manipulative register. "You can't just run away from your problems, darling, or your responsibilities. You belong in the city, with your career, with people who challenge you. not playing house with some rustic hermit. The insult to Alara was a physical blow. I felt a white-hot rage ignite in my chest. But before I could speak, Alara did. Her voice was calm, but it had an edge of steel I had never heard before. "I think you should leave." Sarah laughed, a short, ugly sound. "And who are you to tell me that?" The blind leading the blind. She turned her attention back to me. "Be reasonable, Maya. This is a breakdown. A post-traumatic episode. I get it. The car accident must have been terrifying. But this," she gestured dismissively at Alara, at the cottage, at our life. "This is a fantasy. It's pathetic." The words were designed to wound, to reassert her power over me. And for a terrifying second, they worked. The old me, the one who craved Sarah's approval even as I hated her, reared its head. Doubt, that insidious poison, began to seep in. Was this a fantasy? Was I using Alara's quiet world as a hiding place from my own failures? I felt my grip on Alara's hand tighten. I looked at her. She was standing straight, her chin lifted, her sightless eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Sarah. There was no anger on her face, only a profound, unshakable stillness. She wasn't hearing the insults. She was hearing the fear behind them. She was hearing the hollow core of the woman trying to tear us apart. In that moment, my doubt evaporated, burned away by the certainty I saw in Alara's posture. This was not a fantasy. This was the only real thing that had ever happened to me. "Get off our property, Sarah," I said, my voice low and steady. "Now." Sarah's face tightened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the cold fury beneath. "You'll regret this, Maya. You'll come crawling back when you're bored of this simple little life. And I'll be waiting." With a final, contemptuous glance, she turned on her heel and marched back to her car. The engine roared, and then she was gone, leaving a cloud of dust and the lingering stench of my past. The silence she left behind was fragile, charged. I was trembling, the confrontation having siphoned all the strength from my legs. Alara turned to me, her hands coming up to frame my face. "Are you all right?" she asked, her thumbs stroking my cheeks. A sob broke from me. I collapsed against her, burying my face in her neck. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry she said those things to you." "She didn't say them to me," Alara corrected gently, her arms wrapping tightly around me. "She said them to you to hurt you, because she sees what you have here. She sees the light in you, and it terrifies her because she can't extinguish it." She held me as I cried tears of rage, of shame, of relief. She led me inside and made me tea, her movements as sure and calm as they had been the day she pulled me from the car. The crisis had passed, but the air in our sanctuary had been polluted. A seed of anxiety had been planted in the fertile soil of my heart. Sarah was a vortex of chaos, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that she wasn't done. She had seen my happiness, and for a woman like her, that was a personal affront. The peace we had built felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. Underscore 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 underscore. The phone call came a week later. The landline, its ring a jarring, shrill sound in the quiet cottage. Elara answered it, her face a placid mask as she listened. Yes, I understand. Thank you for letting me know. She hung up, her hand resting on the receiver for a long moment. That was the bank, she said, her voice carefully neutral. There's been a problem. A freeze on my accounts. Allegations of financial coercion. The world tilted. What? They mentioned your name, Maya. They said a concerned third party reported that you were taking advantage of a visually impaired individual, that you were isolating me and manipulating my finances. Sarah, it had to be. It was a brilliant, vicious move. It attacked Elara's independence, the thing she guarded most fiercely. It used my presence, the very thing that brought her joy, as a weapon against her. And it was a lie so plausible, so perfectly tailored to prey on the assumptions of strangers. I saw the crack in her composure then, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in her lower lip. The invasion was worse than Sarah's visit. This was an attack from the shadows, one that threatened the practical, foundational elements of her life. We'll fight it, I said, my voice shaking with fury. We'll get a lawyer. We'll prove it's a malicious lie. It will take time, she said softly, and money. And it will invite them in. Strangers, prying into our life, judging us. The sanctuary was breached. The walls of our cottage were now transparent, under scrutiny. The anxiety seed in my heart sprouted, sending out tendrils of fear. I was the poison. My past, my toxic entanglement with Sarah, was now seeping into Elara's pristine world, threatening to taint everything. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing my lungs. I started having nightmares. Vivid, panicked dreams where I was back in the wrecked car, but this time, Elara was trapped in there with me, and I couldn't get her out. I would wake up gasping, drenched in a cold sweat, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Elara would hold me, her whispers a balm, but the fear had taken root. I began to withdraw. The joy I took in describing the world to her felt forced. The easy laughter between us became strained. Every time I saw her brow furrow in quiet concern over a piece of mail, every time she had to ask me to read something aloud, the guilt would stab me anew. I was a complication, a liability. The fourth kiss was one of desperation. I initiated it, crushing my lips to hers in the kitchen, trying to recapture the feeling of safety, of certainty. She kissed me back, but there was a sadness in it, a question. She could feel me pulling away, my spirit retreating behind a wall she couldn't scale with touch alone. One evening, I found her just standing in the middle of the living room, perfectly still. Her head was bowed, and her hands were clenched at her sides, the posture of profound defeat. It shattered me. "This is my fault," I whispered, the words tearing from my throat. "I brought this to your door. I'm destroying the peace you've built." She didn't deny it. She simply turned her head towards my voice. "Love is not meant to be a fortress without a door, Maya. It's meant to be a shelter that can weather storms. But what if the storm is me?" The question hung in the air, ugly and true. She didn't have an answer. That was the most terrifying thing of all. Underscore 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 underscore. underscore 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 underscore. The climax came on a day that dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the turmoil inside me. The legal pressure was mounting. Sarah, it seemed, was connected, and she was pulling every string she could find. A court date loomed, a humiliating spectacle where Alara's competence would be put on trial. The thought of it made me sick. I was a raw nerve, jumping at every sound. I had made a decision, a terrible, heartbreaking decision born of love and a desperate, flawed logic. I had to leave. I was the source of the poison, and the only way to stop the infection was to remove myself. If I was gone, Sarah would have no reason to attack Alara. The allegations would crumble. She would be safe. Her peace would be restored. I was packing a small bag, my movements jerky and tear-blinded, when I heard her come in from the garden. I froze, a sweater of hers I had been clinging to falling from my numb fingers. Maya? Her voice was quiet. What are you doing? I couldn't speak. The lie, the explanation, stuck in my throat. She moved towards the sound of my ragged breathing, her steps slow and deliberate. She didn't need to see the bag to know. She could feel the intention in the room, the energy of departure. Her hand reached out, brushing against the bag on the bed, then finding my arm. Her touch was ice cold. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. I have to, I choked out, the pain so acute it felt like my ribs were breaking. Don't you see? It's the only way to protect you. As long as I'm here, she won't stop. She'll destroy everything you have, everything you are. I can't let my mess become your ruin. Her face, usually so serene, was a mask of anguish. So your solution is to break my heart? To leave me alone in the ruin you're so afraid of creating? Do you think that will protect me? It will stop the attacks. It will give you your life back. I was sobbing now, great, heaving sobs that racked my whole body. You're my life. The words were a raw, desperate cry. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. You think this is about the cottage? The bank accounts? My life is the sound of your laughter in the morning. It's the weight of your head on my shoulder when you read to me. It's the way you describe the world and make me see it more clearly than I ever could with eyes. You are not protecting me by leaving. You are destroying me. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. She was shaking me, her own tears now falling, tracing silver paths down her cheeks. You asked me once what I saw in you. I see a woman who is so much stronger than she knows. A woman with a heart so vast and so deep, she's just afraid to swim in it. Don't run from this. Don't run from us. Fight with me. Her words were a battering ram against the walls of my fear and guilt. I collapsed against her, my body going limp with the force of my emotion. She held me up, her arms of vice around me, her face buried in my hair. I'm so scared, I whispered, the admission of final surrender. I know, she whispered back, her voice thick with tears. So am I, but we'll be scared together. That's the deal. We sank to the floor, right there in the bedroom, clinging to each other as the storm of our shared fear finally broke. It was our lowest point, a crisis of faith that laid bare every insecurity, every terror. But in the heart of that crisis, we found our truth. Leaving was not protection. It was abandonment. True protection was standing side by side in the face of whatever came next. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next. We stayed like that for a long time, until our tears were spent and the last of the daylight faded from the room. We had reached the bottom, and in that dark, quiet space, we found a new, unshakable foundation. We would fight together. Underscore 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 underscore. The resolution was not a dramatic, cinematic victory. Sarah did not have a sudden change of heart. The legal process was slow, arduous, and demeaning, but we faced it. Ilara, with a quiet, steely dignity that left lawyers speechless, presented her meticulously kept financial records, her history of independent living. I stood beside her, my hand on her shoulder, a silent testament to the truth of our relationship. In the end, the allegations were dismissed. The case crumbled under the weight of its own malicious intent. Sarah, seeing she could no longer reach me, that her hooks were no longer embedded in my flesh, eventually faded away, a ghost from a life I no longer recognized. The victory was not in her defeat, but in what we built from the rubble. We learned that protection isn't about building walls high enough to keep out the world. It's about forging a bond so strong that when the world does intrude, it cannot break you. Ilara protected my heart not by shielding it from pain, but by teaching it how to be brave, how to trust, how to stay. And I, in turn, protected hers, not by fighting her battles for her, but by standing witness to her strength, by being the voice for her in a world that often forgot to listen. We are still here in the stone cottage surrounded by woods. The sweater she was knitting me's finished. I wear it now, the soft, stormy blue will a constant, gentle pressure around me, a wearable embrace. She can't see how the color complements my eyes, but she can feel the fit, the way it stretches across my shoulders, and she knows it is perfect. She is knitting again, something new, her fingers moving with that same timeless rhythm. Click, click, click. I watch her, and my heart, this once broken, fearful thing, swells with a love so vast and so quiet it feels like the deepest peace. She risked everything to protect my heart. She risked her peace, her independence, her quiet life, by choosing to love me, by choosing to fight for me. She saw the wreck I was and did not look away. She reached into the twisted metal of my soul and pulled me free. Her ultimate sacrifice was not one grand, dramatic gesture, but the daily, profound courage of letting someone in, of trusting another person with your whole, vulnerable self. The fire crackles. Her needle clicks. My breath is steady. This is not a happy ending because it is not an ending at all. It is a continuous, unfolding present. A story of two women, one who sees with her hands and one who finally learned to feel with her heart, building a shelter out of love, strong enough to weather any storm. Subscribe to Sapphic Tales for more stories where love is the bravest choice of all.